Trigger warning. This episode may discuss one or more of the following topics: violence, death, including that of people of Indigenous descent, war, abuse, medical issues, self-harming behaviour, eating disorder behaviour or body shaming, drug and alcohol addiction, sexual activity, hate speech or strong abusive language, discrimination, and stereotypes. These potential topics have remained part of the episode as it forms part of the interviewee's story, which cannot be accurately told without including such information. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. G'day and welcome to another episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me Fiona from Brisbane. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Would you like to tell me a little bit about your profession and what it is you do, the name of your business, all that kind of thing?
Sure. So I have recently, this year, set up a life coaching business, and so I'm specialising in alcohol, weight management and ADHD. And I'm finding I'm sort of starting to focus more on the ADHD side of things. And I had been a corporate sort of coach and provided counselling for sort of 20 years in my normal corporate job, and then with my own ADHD diagnosis last year and then my children being diagnosed this year, I sort of have just naturally merged into that ADHD space. And so I basically provide, I feel the gap between what people can access in terms of going from their GP to a psychologist, because a lot of people, especially in the neurodiverse space, need support, need that guidance, and not just from a therapeutic point of view, but also that really firm strategies, tips, actions that they can do to overcome the challenges that they're facing in life. And for a lot of people, even with mental health care plans, they simply can't afford psychologists, or they have to wait months, if not over a year, to be able to get in. And so once I started really understanding that and the process I've had to go through with my own children this year in terms of getting diagnosed and getting them access to the support they need, I thought it's not right that that people are having to sort of be in this space where they're so desperate for help and they just can't get it. And so, as part of my own experience, I had alcohol and weight management experiences myself. And I think looking back on my experience, because I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 47. And so quite a late diagnosis. And then that suddenly puts your whole life into a different perspective. So I think just that lived experience of having to overcome all those challenges, and then at 47 having to develop a sort of whole new self-identity and what did being a neurodiverse person mean, and that sort of having to get to really know who I was as a person, because it really sort of shook my self-identity as a whole. So that's sort of the summing up of how I came to be. So yeah, my business is called Face Your Flaws Coaching, because I think in general a lot of us feel like we're flawed. We've had these experiences, especially from an ADHD perspective. A lot of us have grown up to be people pleasers, just not feeling like we ever fit in, having difficulties with relationships, and really feeling that there was something wrong with us. There's something wrong. There must be something wrong with us. And if we act a certain way, then those relationships are a bit easier, or people will like us, or will fit in. And certainly in my experience, even though I did that time and time again, I still never really felt like I fit in any way. So I really wanted to sort of take that notion of going, we're not actually flawed. And it's more about just going, we actually just, it's about embracing who we are and accepting who we are, and not making excuses for that, not feeling like we have to make excuses for that. So really, I sort of focused on, like a face your flaws kind of thing, and just go, but wanting to empower people to sort of just embrace that and be able to just stand proud in their skin and say, this is who I am.
I think lived experience is so important. I always compare things like somebody writing a parenting book, but not actually ever being a parent. So I just kind of feel like it's not as genuine. I guess like there's an extra added element
Yeah,
of
yeah,
authenticity when you've got lived experience.
yeah. And I think certainly for a lot of my clients, and, even through my own journey, I think with anything in life where you're looking for help, knowing that the other person actually really understands what you're going through and can empathize with you and can honestly validate and acknowledge what you're going through and the difficulties of what you're facing. And I think particularly for the clients I see with ADHD or other uh, neurodiversity, the thing that I hear all the time is just them saying, "Oh, I finally understand that." Because if you're going to get help from somebody who is not neurodiverse, it's kind of like they're talking in a different language. And it sort of really is a bit of a translator role, I think, because especially for a lot of people with ADHD, we tend to think in a more structured and ordered way. So, a sort of presenting something to somebody with ADHD as a concept where it doesn't sort of have that structure to it and isn't positioned in a very clear way is very difficult for a lot of people with ADHD to understand. And if you're asking people to sort of make their own assumptions or put their own lenses onto things, a lot of people are not able to do that. So there's a lot of frustration in that, and I've seen a lot of clients who have suffered that frustration because they go to people and they're trying to get help, but they're really not understanding what that person is talking about, and that person's not presenting it in a way that actually allows them to understand. So I think for me that's the real benefit, because I've got clients who they're neurodiverse but their partner isn't, and so they may be having communication issues within their relationship to say, well, my partner said this, but I don't really understand that. What does that mean? And I can explain it to them, and then I went, oh, okay, now I get what it is. And then giving them the tools that they need to then be able to express that to their partner. So, it can be a really difficult process for people, and especially like me, my husband and I had been married for 10 years before I found out, and it explained a lot about why we had communication problems sometimes, because I really had to learn and figure out what ADHD meant to me and how it impacted my thinking and my perception, and why when somebody says something is 5 mils long, I have no idea what that means. And that, and people talking to me, just, you may as well be talking to me in a foreign language because I do not understand. And so once I sort of could figure that out and just really understand that sometimes it's just a translation role, but it's also about helping people on both sides of the fence. And more I'm actually seeing parents of neurodiverse children, so they're not neurodiverse themselves, but then they need to figure out how to communicate with their children. And so being able to help them actually understand how their children are trying to communicate with them, and getting them to understand it with a neurodiverse lens as well, because you can't try to understand somebody who is essentially talking a different language to you. So it can be a really complex place to be in. And I think basically as people, our relationships are so important to us, and especially, relationships with your partner or relationships with your children, and being able to communicate and feel heard and feel understood, but also be able to understand and hear what the other person is saying is so important. And I think it's a really important place that needs a lot more focus on at the moment, especially in the neurodiverse space, because I'm seeing a lot of people who are really genuinely stressed and anxious and at breaking point because they simply don't know what to do. And I think we're, with the increase in neurodiversity at the moment, certainly a lot of increase in children being diagnosed and adults being diagnosed, I think it's a real potential to cause a lot of family breakdowns and issues that can be addressed by giving people those tools and skills that they need to understand.
Well, I think it makes sense to have like neurodivergent psychologists that look after neurodivergent people, for as an example.
Yeah.
I mean, my son's psychologist is neurodivergent, and so it brings that extra added element of understanding, as you say, and it's easier to build rapport too because you can kind of swap war stories a little bit and things like that. So it's it gives you a different perspective, but it gives you a perspective that you can relate better to. We're obviously not all the same. I'm ADHD myself, but that doesn't mean that I'm the same as every ADHD person. And having your own like identity too. Like I find that when you get diagnosed, everyone kind of puts you in a box of like, oh, you're ADHD, and that's that. And it's like, well, no, I'm still like an actual human being, and it's different for everybody. So
Like even in my house, between myself and my two children, so three of us have ADHD, but we all present in different ways. And even the assumptions people make about ADHD. So, like when people say to me, but you've got 3 degrees, how can you have ADHD? It's like, it doesn't mean you don't have capacity or capability. It just means you learn and process and understand in a different way. And we have
yeah,
different requirements that we need. And so, really educating the broader public on what that means. And I think certainly even in my experience, it's really even taken like until this year for me to advocate in my workspace for the considerations I need to be able to work at my premium level. And that was a difficult step out of my comfort zone to be able to do, because even sort of understanding that these sort of, having the right kind of screen and having the right kind of desk set up and asking people to approach me in certain ways so they don't scare the Jesus out of me because they just suddenly turn up and I'm hyper focused on something. Just that advocacy and education of others in our environment has been a really big step for me to take this year too, because certainly for me, I've never been somebody who openly asks for help, and it's taken me a while to sort of just accept that as part of my diagnosis and part of the education around that, to say it's actually okay for me to ask for help. It's okay that I need this extra support to be able to function, because if I only had one leg, it's not like I would not get about in a wheelchair. So I sort of had to really change my thinking around that and really give myself permission to be able to ask for that help and support. I think that's a big step for people as well, to sort of understand that, thinking about neurodiversity on all its different levels as something you need support for, and as a disability for a lot of people, it's a really sort of hard thing, but an important thing to make sure that we are working and living and operating in these environments where we spend a lot of time in. And for me, it was just really saying, well, I deserve the highest quality of life I can have. And if these things help me achieve that, then I need to advocate for myself to get those.
Well, I think a lot of these kinds of professions within the neurodivergent world, it's all about problem solving and thinking outside the box. And there's just like neurotypical people, no two people are the same. So you're constantly having to think on your feet. Or I know when I'm trying to navigate things with my son, I'm really trying to think very differently. And since being diagnosed, it's kind of helped in a way because I've gone, oh, yeah, okay, maybe he's feeling that way because I kind of feel that way right now because of that sound, or, just as an example. But it kind of opened my eyes to different ways to think to help people rather than just kind of sticking to the way you would naturally think. What is your favorite part of your job and what is your least favorite part of your job?
I think the favourite part of my job is seeing people have those aha moments. You know, where something really clicks in them that they either weren't aware of or hadn't realised, or sort of sends them off on a little different, cognitive journey that they really need, as part of that healing journey or change journey that they're on. And also for people to say, oh, I finally understand that for the first time, or I feel like I'm heard or seen for the first time. And I think just the gratitude and the recognition, that so many people, and myself included, to actually really feel seen and heard. I think that's the sort of most important, the part I really just love. I think the most difficult part is hearing about the trauma so many people have suffered. And a lot of times, whether it's addiction or ADHD or, whatever challenge you happen in life, a lot of that has stemmed from trauma people have experienced. And I think, especially, for those of us who, went really struggled through childhood because we didn't know what was happening and we didn't have that support, it's left a really big impact on, certainly on me and for a lot of other people as well. And so I think just hearing those stories and understanding it so deeply from a personal level and really feeling the pain and really understanding that pain and difficulty, and that's probably the least favorite but the most important. So it's sort of yin and yang, because I think understanding that is the best way to help people move through it.
And I think you can't really be neurodivergent and not have had trauma in your life at some point. Usually it stems from not being diagnosed as a child and then not really knowing how to navigate life up until that point where you get diagnosed and you, as you say, have those aha moments and go, okay, now I understand. And letting go of all of that, like, self shame, I guess, and
Yeah.
being able to forgive yourself for all of the things you thought were stupid or weird or whatever. So it's definitely, I don't think I've met a single person that is neurodivergent yet that hasn't had some sort of childhood trauma, either relating to bullying or what have you. But generally speaking, those people weren't diagnosed until later in life. But I'm also noticing too a trend with um, there have been late diagnosed men, but generally speaking, it's the women that are late diagnosed and not picked up as children. So it's but I mean, back I know even when I was little, it was a very much a only boys can have autism kind of situation. So um, it's it's tricky.
It's people learning about it too. And so the same kind of thing when I was at school, and then my first career was actually in working in childcare. I worked in childcare for 8 years, and that was probably, so we're sort of talking mid-90s. It was probably when ADHD was sort of first really coming to the surface, and basically all the kids got at that stage was Ritalin. And it was very much that stereotypical loud, noisy, can't sit still little boy. Nobody spoke about girls having it. And it was really, unless that boy behaved like that, then and even if they did, they were still just naughty kids. But when I think about that, and when I think about how I did see children with ADHD behave, I was like, well, that's exactly how I used to behave. Exactly the same. Probably just way better at masking it. And as a female, we tend not to have that hyperactivity level so much, and more the inattentive side. Uh, not making a stereotypical call, but just based on the research. And we're much better at masking. And so that's exactly what I was like. And I was one of these fortunate people, for whatever reason, happened to have kept all my report cards from primary school. And when, as part of my diagnosis, when I went back and read them all, every single one was, Fiona would do so much better if she would only pay more attention. Fiona easily distracts and is easily distracted by others. And, this was back in the days when teachers actually could write whatever they wrote on report cards. And even reading some of the comments now, they're actually really stinging comments to make about, a little child who was trying to figure out why, it was so hard to focus and pay attention and learn. And so I think that having children be able to be supported and understand that there is not that stereotypical presentation is even really so important for parents now, so that they can see it in their children. Because even with a lot of parents, and myself included, I was sort of beating myself up to go, how did I not see it in my own child who's a girl? And why have I only just picked up on that? But she presented in a very different way to me. And then I sort of had to really show myself some self-compassion to say, as parents, we're not educated on these things. No one gives you a handbook and says, hey, this is what ADHD can look like. It's really just about us having enough intuition or enough sort of sense that something's not quite right. And, we can be told by the medical profession so often that, they're just a naughty kid. And, I've had friends with, children who have ended up being diagnosed with ADHD or ASD actually being told, just take them home, they're just a naughty kid. And so even from the medical profession, when you're a parent just going, I know there's just something not right and I just want to find out what it is, to sort of even be fobbed off doesn't help you, and sort of makes you question again, like, is this, am I thinking this right? Am I overthinking this? Am I making this up? And then there's just so much self-doubt, that can come in, where at the end of the day, you are just a parent who loves your child and you're just trying to figure out if there's something that they need extra support with, and you're just trying to find the answers to do that. And I think a lot of times it can be made a lot more difficult than what it needs to be. And I mean, I certainly within the Facebook communities and other groups that I'm a part of, that support for each other is so important, because, again, it's being with people who understand the struggles that you're facing and the frustrations that you're facing, and being able to support each other through that. And those who have been lucky enough to have a quicker journey or a more targeted journey, or have been able to afford more therapy for their children or themselves, and being able to share that with people who can't, I think has been so valuable in those sort of communities as well. So, sometimes parents have to take things into their own hands to really reach out. And so, certainly in my own journey for my children, I could understand my testing process, but it was a totally different process for my children that I had no idea about. And then, that was just the testing and diagnosis, let alone we then had to apply for NDIS, and that was another whole process that, again, the communication is difficult, understanding is difficult. People's experiences are not even the same, even though their children may have the same diagnosis. So, it can cause such overwhelm and so much anxiety that ongoing support is just so essential for people.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of myths around just disabilities in general, but ADHD gets a bit of a bad rap because people will be like, oh, you can't be ADHD, you can sit still, or, oh, that your son doesn't have ADHD, he's just a boy, and that's why he runs around so much. So, like, all my ADHD is generally internalized, but whereas my son, it's like you can tell if he hasn't had medication that he's got ADHD. So, um, there's a lot of myths around it, and educating people about the differences within each individual disability is very important, which leads me to my next question. Why do you think your profession is so important?
Because I think it is giving people access to that help, information, and education, and being able to do it in a way that saves them time. Because I've spent hours and hours and hours trawling through websites and talking to people, and as part of my qualifications and university study, and it's taken hours and cost a lot of money to educate myself. And so if people can come and sit down with me for an hour session and just sort of get the information or the strategies or the help that they're needing at that particular time, that they can then go off and implement, and then come back and say, well, that worked, or that didn't work, or that was great, but is there something else we can do? It lets them address the problem as soon as possible. And I think, especially, ADHD coaching especially has become a lot more widestream now, and I think the gap that fills is being able to have somebody to be able to sit down and not just talk about the strategies and tips and tools, but also to be able to process that emotional trauma or anxiety or depression, or that sort of emotional impact that ADHD can create as well. And it all sort of goes, hand in hand together.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It has been a pleasure to talk to you and get to finally meet you. But
Thank you.
it definitely, a lot of information there to take on board. And yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, look, I hope I hope it just helps a lot of people to be able to understand that there is help out there, and that they can do the best to help themselves and their kids or partners, and just lead their absolute best life that they deserve to live.
Well, if you're local to the area, make sure you check out Face Your Flaws coaching.
And
Yeah,
online too.
thank you
So
very much.
anywhere in Australia can help. Thanks for having me.